Going on, everybody? I'm Aslan. That is Corey Clark, senior writer for Warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. Hit the thumbs up button, everybody. Show a little support for what we're trying to get done for you this spring as we get closer and closer to the start of spring football, which starts on Saturday. Mike Norvell has a luncheon Friday. We'll have full coverage of that on the website. But before then, let's talk about some of these position battles, Corey. We've gone through some of the offense. I think we've gone through all the offense. We've moved now to the defense. You and I, we're some Bucks, some Jacks, some Tigers, Bears, whatever. We're talking about linebackers, Corey. Maybe this wasn't a good one to put me on because I sort of diminished the role of linebackers and the overall success of a defense. But Florida State has got a new linebackers coach. They signed a freshman, Omar Graham Jr. They got a transfer in Tatum Bethune to add to what they already have. What sort of growth did you maybe see from the linebacking core that maybe puts you to where you're at right now, thinking about that position as we go into spring football?
Well, yeah, I think last year going into the season, that to me was as big a question mark as any on the team. And they had a few offensive line, wide receivers. But with Kalen DeLoach and what he did really the whole season, being competent, being a serviceable linebacker, and there were days where he was actually good, like a good college linebacker. The Boston College game comes to mind. But there were other games where that guy made plays. He was a good player for them. And I did not expect that at all going into last season. So you go in with that knowledge already that, okay, you've got a legitimate starting linebacker, a guy that can make tackles, that can fight blocks. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he can go. He seems to be instinctual a little bit. He seems to have some linebacker instincts. And then Gaynor is a guy that, has played a lot of football here and has made some plays too. He has not had any like wow games or wow moments, but he's been a solid linebacker where you don't feel bad about that, about him coming back too. So you've got two guys that you feel pretty good about anyway. And then you throw in the transfer from UCF, like you mentioned. And all of a sudden, I don't know if it's the strength of the team. It isn't. But it's not a weakness, or it doesn't have to be a weakness if those three guys stay healthy and can be on the field. I think that's a pretty solid college linebacking core, which I know it's Florida State. We're not looking for solid. You want more than that. But where it's been the last few years, you'll take solid right now.
Yeah, right on, man. As you can kind of hopefully see in the middle of your screen, folks, you've got it clustered, the linebackers from last season. They've got 6 that got reps, that registered on Pro Football Focus. DeKalen Brooks has left the program, and Cortez Andrews is a walk-on, so that kind of shows you how limited they were with numbers. I guess we should maybe mention Brendan Gant maybe trying to get a second lease on life, moving down into the box core, so that's another possibility. Omar Graham Jr., as we kind of mentioned, a true freshman. And then Jadarius Green McKnight's the guy who saw limited action on special teams. Do any of those 3 guys kind of have any allure to you, whether it's Gant or maybe a sort of asset that we don't know about, like Omar Graham Jr. or Jadarius Green McKnight, that we think might have something under the surface?
Yeah, with Graham, it's always hard to imagine a true freshman's going to come in and get valuable snaps unless some injuries happen. Gant's a little bit, that's a there's some novelty there where you're like, okay, maybe that better suits his skill set. Maybe he won't be so close to the sideline where he's getting 15-yard penalties for knocking guys out of bounds. Maybe that doesn't happen as much at linebacker as it does when he was a DB or just in kick coverage. But yeah, I think that probably suits his skill set a little bit more. But yeah, no, I don't expect. I mean, I think you're looking at Lundy's in the mix too, obviously, and then the 3 guys already mentioned. I think those are your 4 that you're going to be riding with for most of the year. Steven Dix, maybe. I'm fearful he might just be a weight room wonder, and he's incredible. I mean, he's an incredible physical specimen. He's probably got to be one of the strongest guys on the team. It's just he looks like a superhero, but he just hasn't proven to have the ability, the instinctual ability to play linebacker at this level, or at least play it well. But he's also just a redshirt freshman, or going into his sophomore year, so maybe he can find it. But don't you think those are the 4 main guys that you're looking at in this linebacking core?
Absolutely. And isn't that pretty much all you really need when you're going to be running primarily, we think, a 4-2-5?
Injuries, though, you always wonder about injuries, and you want to have depth, and you want to have competitive depth. Like, you want those guys to be challenged, and I don't know necessarily right now that linebacker depth is where you'd want it to is DeLoach going to feel some pressure from some young whippersnapper that he's coming for his job? Like, competition breeds success, man, and it breeds improvement. And I don't know if these guys are going to get a lot of competition from those younger guys just yet.
I think Lundy will push. I think Lundy can push. Again, I don't know how much interchangeability there is with the 2 sort of linebackers that they are going to use. But ultimately, at the end of the day, like you kind of said, Amari, DeLoach, Tatum Bethune. I mean, at least those 3 guys. Those are I think you feel pretty darn good about what you have there. To fill, I know it's only 3 to fill 2 spots, but from where this position group has been, seems like we're in a little bit perhaps better shape. So very curious to see how that's going to work out. How much of an impact do we think Randy Shannon's going to be? He was on staff last season as an analyst, but now he moves on field. He is the linebackers coach. For whatever his path has led him to being a position coach now, he's a pretty respected guy in the game. Do we think we'll see? Is there anything particular that we think we might see, like a better tackling team? I just think at the base of it, we'll see a more confident linebacking core. It doesn't matter. I heard something the other day, like it doesn't matter how fast you are. If you're confused, you're slow. I would like to think that he's going to be able to kind of communicate the scheme to these players in a way that'll let them kind of play free, because that's Amari's strength. That's Kalen's strength, right? I mean, is playing fast, because they are a little bit undersized, at least Kalen.
Well, and I think what could help too is communicating in a way where what the linebackers are doing are working in concert with what the defensive scheme is. Maybe more so than was in the past. And I'm not saying Marv was doing a bad job in that area, but sometimes confusion is just being out of place because you don't know what the back end is doing, or you didn't know what the front end was doing. There was It's not just communication between the linebackers; it's communication between the 3 different phases of a defense. And if you don't know what the defensive line's doing, maybe you're out of position where I just think that Randy Shannon can maybe bring a little bit more of that, like the whole defense working in concert with the linebackers being in the right spot more often than not. But yeah, I think his main role is recruiting.
All right. Well, that's
I shouldn't say that. A big role for him on this staff is recruiting. But he was a national championship linebacker at Miami. He's been coaching it forever, so it certainly shouldn't hurt.
Anything to read into the fact that Gant was the one that made the move into the box and not Travis Jay? I always kind of thought if Travis Jay wasn't going to try to move to the offensive side of the ball, maybe linebacker would be better suited for him. He'd still be kind of a little bit of a tweener, but it kind of be interesting to see his athleticism in the box. Does that maybe just say that there's still a future for him on the back end, or do you take anything away from that?
No, again, we've been pushing for him to be wide receiver. We've been pushing him to play any position but the ones he's been playing. So maybe defensive end, even put 40 pounds on him and let him be a defensive end. We'll see. Travis Jay's story is not written yet. And let me clarify with Randy Shannon, the recruiting aspect is the Miami connection. That is a big deal to have a guy like that on your staff that has those kind of tentacles in that city, because you hope that he can start tapping that pipeline again, not just for Miami players, but the great Miami players, and they start coming up to Florida State again.
And this last thing, Corey, you've kind of been of the thought that the offense is going to have to be the part of this team that's going to help lead to improved play in 2022. The defense will probably take a step back, but the linebackers aren't going to be part of that. I mean, can the linebackers stem the tide from whatever step we do think the defense might take back in 2022?
Yeah, I think we think that the defensive end production won't be what it was last year. You lost one of the best players in the country, and Keir Thomas was really darn good too. So the defensive ends, even with Verse coming in, aren't going to be as good as they were last year. So the pass rush will take a step back. The defensive line as a whole will probably not be as good. Won't be as good because they lost Jermaine Johnson. But maybe you make up for it with the linebackers being that much better. Like Kalen DeLoach at the end of the year was a good player, man. Like he's a good linebacker. And you throw in Bethune in there with him. Bethune's a tackling machine. When you look at his game log, he had a game with 18 tackles. He had a game with 16 tackles. I think he had 10 or 11 against Florida in the bowl game. Those aren't normal numbers around here. This guy finds the football, and he's played against good competition, not great competition, but they've played some legit, really big boy teams while he's been at UCF, and he's played well against them. So I think the addition of him, it does not offset Jermaine Johnson at all, because number one, they're different positions. But I think it does make your defense better, and he's not going to have a Jermaine Johnson type impact because he's not a pass rusher. But I think he can have that kind of impact on the linebacking core as a whole, like where all of a sudden the whole tide gets raised because you've got a perhaps an all-conference type candidate coming in to play right away, and he can teach the young guys. This is how you care. This is what it is to be a tackling machine, to be an instinctual every play linebacker that's always around the ball. And I think by osmosis, but watching this guy work, watching this guy play, watching him on film can only help all those guys that are in the position group.
Yeah, for sure, man. All right, well, let's see what's going on with the back end of the defense. We'll come back with that later on this week. think Tom and I will be having that one covered for everybody. But do stay connected to warchant.com. Tour of Duty will be allowed out there to watch it Tuesday morning, so we'll have plenty of coverage from that. We won't have photos and video, but lots of observations. Corey and I will knock out a podcast. It'll drop Wednesday, and headlines Tuesday afternoon will be live. Ira, Jeff, Corey talking about all of that sort of stuff. So stay connected to warchant.com. There is no offseason when you're a Florida State football fan. Corey, thank you for your knowledge.